This lesson is about one of my all-time favorite tools, the Japanese developed paper pot transplanter. And one of the reasons I love this tool is because in the springtime it gives me so much extra time. There's so much that needs to happen this time of year, and we save several hours a week from our work by using this tool. There are some tricks to making it work properly. I'm going to give you some key pointers. Make sure it works properly if you decide to go this direction. So basically what we're doing here is we have our 264 plug alternative, which is paper chains. We have a paper chain of 264 head lettuce in here, and these actually happen to be at the every other row spacing, and I have a chart that'll show you how to achieve that every other row spacing. So I've got 6-inch paper chain in here. I've got every other row spacing so that these are going to transplant out at about 12 inches apart from one another. I want these to have plenty of room to be fairly large, grow into fairly large head lettuce. This is Hartman from the Osborne Seed Company, one of my all-time favorite head lettuces. Okay, so a little bit about the tool. So this chain is going to slip into here, and we're going to cut a furrow with this tool. And you see there's a furrower down here, and then the chain's going to unravel along here, and as it unravels, the soil is going to be filled in around the transplant from the front end, and there are some press wheels up here too that are going to help press that soil around that transplant. And so it's doing there's a lot of functions happening all at once here very quickly, and it's a tool I'm going to be able to use from a comfortable upright position too. So a bit about some of the adjustments that you can do on this tool. First is you don't actually need to use the press wheels. They can come up if that ever helps. I always keep them down, and that's always been the right decision. On some models, you can do more adjusting down here. This is the original Japanese HP10 model transplanter, and I've tried the Teratech and some of the newer models, and I still prefer the original, and I guess because it is the lightest weight and simplest too. Very few moving parts on here, and anyone on the farm can easily pick it up and move it around. Some of the newer models weigh 20 pounds or more than this, and are a little more cumbersome to use. However, I think a lot of it depends on your preference and your soil type. This maybe needs a finer soil type, and some of the newer models with more of the adjustment options will give you a wider range of soil types that you can use your transplanter in. Okay, another adjustment. There are various ways of bridging the space between where your chains sit and where the rest of the tool. And I prefer just to have a little ramp sit right here, and I'll show you how I slip that underneath the lettuces. You can also pin a ramp on here, and some of the other models have different options, but a simple ramp is really all you need. And then it's important to set this at a comfortable height. And I've got it as tall as it'll go here. I'm not a super tall person, but for some reason the tallest is the most comfortable height. And then this is going to allow for a depth adjustment as we transplant. And so as I go along, I'll do a few feet and I'll see if I've got the right depth adjustment. And usually I'll leave it and not adjust it as I'm transplanting. And then I can do further depth adjusting by hand here by pushing. That's going to be a shallower transplant, or by lifting for a deeper transplant. Okay, so I'll do a few feet, see what seems to work in the conditions I have, and then I'll just leave it and do adjusting by hand. This tool is ideal for larger plantings. If you're doing 264 or more plugs at a time, if you have an account that only wants 30 bok choys on a weekly basis or something, then this is not your right tool. Then you're going to want to continue to go back to hand transplanting. It's also not the right tool for zucchinis and watermelons, tomatoes, some larger crops that need really wide spacing. Hand transplanting is still the best way to go here. So my best tip, however, is to transplant crops as young as you can, and to think of this as direct seeding. You're direct seeding pre-sprouted seeds as much as you are transplanting. And I say that because you only have less than 1 inch is the size of the cells here. So these crops are not going to be sit around and look healthy 7, 8, 9 weeks after being seeded in here. There's just not enough potting mix to allow that to happen. And the transplanting goes smoother too if you don't have crops that have a lot of root mass all bound up. And so these guys here about 4 weeks, and I don't like them to be any bigger than what you see here. And however, it has to be, the crop has to be big enough that there's enough of a true leaf that you're not covering the plant up. And there's going to be no danger of, almost no danger of covering the entire plant here. These are well established enough. And so my last tip here before I get started, I'm going to be talking as I transplant, is to don't skip any of your best practices with transplanting. And so it's nice to do it when you've got a little bit of cloud cover. It's a bit of a shady day today. It's a good day for transplanting. It's nice to do it going into the evenings if you got to avoid those hot afternoons when stressful in plants. And it's nice to pre-wet your soil. We just had 4 or 5 inches of rain here a couple days ago, so there's a lot of good soil moisture content, and yet it should be dry enough I can get in here and work it. Okay, so, and last tip is pre-soak your trays too. This guy was sitting in a tray. I use cafeteria trays, but boot trays or dog kennel trays, anything that's going to hold a ½ inch of water. Get these guys good and soaked a couple hours before going in. You'll be much happier with your transplant. Okay, so in terms of soil preparation, it can be a little bit chunkier than direct seeding. However, I do pretty much the same step, same process as with direct seeding, and I usually leave out the last raking. However, you do need fairly good soil conditions for this thing to work. And you can see this like I've said before, this is a new property. We're starting fresh, and so we've got more chunks and more irregularities in here than I would hope to have in the years to come. And so you see there's a kind of a chunky stick. And it's a little bit crusty, a little tough. And so I've added some compost on here, and what I'm going to do is actually do a skim till pass with my BCS just to fluff it up a little more, and it's going to make it easier for that furrower to do the action it needs to in here. Okay, so this was definitely not a full depth till. maybe went down 2 or 3 inches, enough to make sure the paper pot transplanter is going to pass through easily in here. But it's much nicer, and it helped to kind of even out that compost too. And there are still some chunks in here. And so what I'm going to do is use my bed rake and just make sure there's nothing there. I just, for instance, pull out a stick or a root mass that could have gummed up that paper pot transplanter. So there I just pull out a sod chunk. Never know what you'll find on you. Probably a lot of golf balls in here. Previous owner must have treated this like a driving range or a golf course. Okay, so a couple more sod chunks. Anyhow, I'm doing this, it's new property. Next year and in coming years, hopefully won't have to be able to skip that last step. Okay, so the transplanter itself, easy to carry by one hand. It's got a nice handle. And I'm going to begin down at the end here. And I'll work my way this direction. And let's do a cut. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and slip the little ramp piece underneath. And locate the end. You see it start to unravel, and you can see that there are plants at every other hole, and that's going to give me 12-inch spacing. Many crops, every hole is filled. And so at the beginning here, what I like to do is just cut this first part out a little bit by hand. Pull out the chain and then really squeeze that first one in. And that's going to act as an anchor pin. So this thing is going to unravel. I can get as many as 6 rows paper pot chains on a 30-inch bed. For this particular crop, 3 rows is going to be plenty. I want nice large heads here. It's going to start unraveling. The first row in the middle, I like to straddle. I'll show you a couple different ways of doing this. You can also walk along with one hand. I'm kind of a short person, that's a little bit awkward for me. On the first pass, I like to just do this. Okay, so very quick transplanting. And those press wheels are making sure the soil's pressed very nicely around the transplant. Okay, and then I'm about to the end. Gonna go ahead and rip the paper, and then I guess I'll come around this direction and repeat the process. It's nice to start your next furrow maybe a foot or two ahead. And then, like I said last time, I'm going to pull out the chain. I'm going to really press that first one in. And repeat the process. One thing that you'll notice is I am doing some height adjusting. So I'm noticing I want to go a little deeper. This edge is a little more stiff. And so I'm lifting, just giving a little bit upward lift on here. And that's going to cover those guys a little nicer. Okay, then at the end, gonna go ahead and rip. And we'll turn around and go the other direction. Up. So occasionally that will happen. There's something in here. There it is. Put that in my stone soup. Anyhow, you got to get out chunks. And now I got a nice, go a little longer here. Cut a nice furrow. And again, press. One of the things about the paper is that it's not approved for certified organic use at the time of this filming. And I know they're working on developing papers that will be approved. And at this point, our farm is not certified organic. We're non-certified organic, use the same growing methods. We had been certified organic for a number of seasons. And none of our accounts have asked us to continue that, or none of our accounts have said they require us to have the certification. And so we dropped the certification, but use the same growing practices. Okay, so when things are really going smoothly, you can just kind of walk along. And I always have an eye on two places. I want to make sure the chain is unraveling nicely here. I want to make sure they're being transplanted as they should at the other end. And then doing some slight height adjusting as I go along. Okay, there's my demonstration of the paper pot transplanter.